Welcome to section number 6. I hope I didn't lose you last time, but as I promised, today it will be easier, and we will look through some slides. I uploaded the slides for the next 3 weeks on StudIP today, and we will go through them now. But before this, important announcement. There will be this nice event by our team, like by our Arbeitsgruppe at the IKW in the theater in 2 weeks' time from now on a Tuesday evening. It's in German. I'm sorry for that because it's for the general public here in Osnabrück. But if you like to come to talk more about Elon Musk, Doge, and alt-right politics, how it merges with AI ideologies, please come. At the same time, this is today also the first session of the second block in this lecture. I told you in the beginning that there will be 3 blocks of 4 sessions each, and the second block is on AI and ideologies, starting today. And we will also be actually debating the topic that, like where AI ideologies merge with authoritarian politics. We will debate that here in the lecture on the very same day, by coincidence, on the very same day of that event. But let's first start, as always, with a little recap of last session. And I'm well aware that the topic of power, especially productive and relational power and subjectivation, is not an easy topic. I think it will get clearer throughout the lecture because we will be making use of that occasionally. So I will just roughly kind of summarize or try to summarize what I tried to tell you last time. Imagine power does not confine you or repress you from without or push you around like from without, like putting you in this place or that place or pushing you in this direction or pushing you in that direction as an external force on you or your body and all of that, but instead that power operates through you, through you by shaping your perceptions, motivations, feelings, and so on. So imagine power came up with a kind of a hacker strategy that instead of externally kind of restricting entities such as individuals, it would rather hijack them so that they act as complicits or in a complicit way to the interests of the power apparatus as a whole. And imagine this happens in such a way that we are not all zombies following external mind invasion orders, but that we are still persons with personality, freedom, and so on, but at the same time probabilistically or roughly aligned with the interests of power. This is, I would say, a constellation that you could call it soft power, you could call it structural power, you could call it productive power or power that operates through structures of subjectivation. So through the production of subjectivity, if subjectivity is the way you refer to yourself, to others, to the world, and in referring to yourself, to others, or the world, use epistemic resources such as categories, names, norms that are given or that are intertwined with the power apparatus or the power structure. So upon using these conditions or epistemic conditions, you at the same time play a part in a power apparatus, not necessarily in a deterministic way, but in a way that probabilistically or roughly or by way of tendency perpetuates that apparatus or the interests of that apparatus, often without noticing, and so on. This is maybe the idea, and I would say, and this is what I tried to tell you, that this fits quite neatly with what we see in AI. So imagine, therefore, that the power of big tech apparatuses is more like this here, and there you see such a constellation where it needs all of the very different subjects, and I mean there are only user subjects visible in this image here, but such a picture would also contain programmers, designers, investors, politicians making decisions, and all the spectrum of subject positions that are relevant. Imagine that the power of such technological apparatuses, or maybe even societies at large, is then sourced from the interplay of the actions, thinking, feeling, acting of all the single subjects on the one hand, and on the other hand, the part of this power strategy is to make sure that such individuals get reproduced, so that you kind of shape subjectivity, so the way of referring to yourself, to others, or to the world, in such a way that you play part in such apparatuses. Yeah, these two ways. The relation between the individual and such dispositives of power is co-constitutive, that is, constituting in both ways. You can say it's circular if you are very analytic, but of course it's not circular, because there are always some people already on the world playing a certain game, and then new people get born and grow into it and take over playing that game. Maybe they shift it a little bit because they are new people, and others die away, and so there is not really a logical circularity here. It's just a processual understanding. To put it in less graphic terms and in more conceptual terms, so if you want to, or this notion of productive power brings the idea that societal power in part shapes or constitutes individuals, and therefore such a theory does not start from individuals as pre-constituted or pre-given or with essential characteristics, but it rather asks, okay, how did you actually acquire that characteristic as a symptom or an effect of the larger societal constellation, rather than ascribing it to you, which is a way of questioning matters of affairs or power apparatuses. And on the other hand, the power apparatus is structured and enacted through people's behavior, so people actually enact power. Yeah, there is now no external or separate entity. Power is not a separate ontological entity from that interplay, but still it is not reducible to the individuals. This is basically what we kind of what we get when we employ such a theory of power. Yeah, there is this slide once again, which was already in this sketch earlier. So how is this evident in AI? And I think particularly in AI, this is so important because as much as commercial AI systems rely on the human labor, their development and deployment is about shaping subjectivity so as to make users really want to use those digital media services. And actually, today's session will be devoted on these mechanisms. So if you question this first bullet point here, please lean back and listen. And not just, but the thing is that this is not just exploitation and extraction of value or data or what it is from the people, but it also is the reproduction of the society or of the dispositif of power by actively shaping the people. And this again will get clear today. This is actually already my summary of last time. I decided that let's not be dogmatic, let's not kind of bring Foucault quotes again and so on. I think it's more important for me that you get this general vision or general understanding, maybe even heuristic understanding of what I mean by productive power, and the rest will show itself in application. As I said, today we will transition to this second block. I termed it AI ideologies. Yeah, what is an ideology? Or that is actually hard to define, but when analyzing ideologies, I mean to analyze certain constellations of power that do not only use technology or rely on technology, but really on mindsets. And such mindsets you often refer to as ideologies. And in referring to a certain mindset as an ideology, you usually want to point out that there is something unnoticed or hidden interests in this mindset, or hidden assumptions that perpetuate certain powerful interests but that are not aware to the people themselves. Maybe ideologies are also things that people take for granted without questioning, that are kind of the common sense of a certain age in a certain society or in a certain milieu or bubble or discipline or community of co-workers. Yeah, it can be on different scales also. We will use the next 4 sessions to go through some aspects of ideology in the context of AI. And today the start will be rather soft, I guess, by what I termed AI paternalism. And this AI paternalism, I will speak in 3 parts, if I remember correctly. And the first part is really what I already alluded at 3 slides ago. How do we make users how do we trick users into using certain services in a way that is beneficial to the system or to the business model or to the apparatus and its own interests? And the whole concept of nudging, I would say, is actually one of the key concepts in this respect. To bring that to you, I have a lot of screenshots now, and you can really just lean back and also look at the images and kind of make up your mind. So it will, at large parts, not be very conceptual, this presentation today, but more like analyzing images. Here, this is maybe one of the oldest, already ancient images I'm showing you today. It's a screenshot from a Google Accounts sign-in page. I think it is a little bit dated, at least judging from the typography and typeface. What do they do here? It's this moment you sign in to a Google sign-in, and then they ask you already typed your username and password, or it is, and then they ask you for your phone number, suggesting to you that you will lose all your data if your email address fails and they cannot reach you anymore, so you cannot sign into your account anymore because you lost your password. So maybe add your phone number so there is a second way for them to reach you, so reach out to you. That is maybe here the idea. If you don't want to give your phone numbers, maybe you have a good reason for not giving your phone number, from not having a phone number to such a thing as data protection concerns. You will also find that option down here. There you can click here if you don't want to do that. This is intentional bad design, right? If you study a little bit good web design, you would, for instance, learn that you never label a clickable link by click here, because links should speak for themselves. Yeah, they should be named in a way that you know where you get when you click there. So click here is actually the worst name for a link, and Google is well aware of that. So this is just intentional bad design because it makes it statistically less likely that people would click here instead of typing their phone number. Also, I mean, watch the font size, see that this is gray here. It is very unlikely statistically. Yeah, it's not impossible to click here, so there will be users clicking here because users might search for this, but like on average you make it more likely that people just perceive there is the necessity to enter the phone number, so they do it and click on add phone, and then they get to the next screen. This is a typical design trick. A design trick to trick users into providing something you want to have from them, but they might not actually want to give it to you. And here you see different ways of persuasion operating together. For instance, giving a reason, which might be a fake reason, or at least a reason that is blown up in its relative importance. The security argument, and then also design. Here, other examples. When you download from the Google Play Store on Android an app that's actually free and you did not yet register your credit card information in Google Play, they would kind of suggest to you that you need to enter your credit card information anyway, although you don't need to pay for that app because it's free. But you can skip that step if you find the link or the gray skip button. I mean, gray buttons are often buttons that are inactive, so unavailable, so they are kind of deceiving the user here intentionally. So because they want to have credit card data. Why do they want to have credit card data? It's such a great unique identifier, right? If you have, if you can connect, I mean, Google already has your device ID, potentially your location information, your search history from the phone, possibly your phone number. And if they can also connect that to your credit card number, they have yet another unique identifier on the world connected to the rich data set that they already have about you. And linking the data I just mentioned with, for instance, purchasing history data is a very profitable business because you can then sell predictive products. Here, this is maybe the most ancient screenshot in the presentation. The 1990s version of Ryanair.com, but they got famous for being one of the first airlines using dark patterns, as you would call them, if they are really outright deceptive, like design decisions or design strategies that really trick users into doing something, buying something, providing data they would actually not want to do, buy or provide, is also sometimes called a dark pattern. It's a concept that was actually called out on the web in the early 2000s. I think it came from Harry Bringnell, but I'm not sure whether he was really the first to use that concept. But you see here that they, as typical in the checkout procedure on an airline website, when you buy a ticket, they would sell you a rental car, a hotel room, and here also a travel insurance. And if you don't want an insurance, you have to pick this option here from a drop-down menu where you actually are suggested that you have to pick your country. So this is a really deceptive design. It's very unlikely that people would find out this way of evading buying this insurance. I think, for instance, the EU has at a certain point regulated how such checkout procedures should look like or can look like to rule out certain very predatory dark patterns as a response to such designs. Nowadays, for instance, there has to be always the default that you're not buying it. So if you always click on next, you will not end up buying something extra. But that is a regulation. Yeah, that is not what companies voluntarily do, but that is the product of a regulation. Here, also a nice little case study. At the times of Cambridge Analytica, I don't know if you know Cambridge Analytica, potentially yes. There was a switch in Facebook's, and this is only exemplary for all the social media platforms, interaction design when it came to permission requests. So you probably know that on such social media platforms you can operate third-party apps, for instance games that are embedded then in the platform, or little quizzes or whatever it is. And if you use these third-party apps, these embedded little software tools, you would typically pass data about your account to these software tools. Such software tools might actually be marketed on the platform because people want to get the data and not really sell you a browser game, but rather get your data. And to trick you into giving them your data, they provide a browser game that you might want to play. And classically, there was then this kind of a barrier. When you play bird cards, Angry Birds. If you wanted to play Angry Birds on Facebook, you would get this nice request screen that would list to you what the app would receive and then allow or don't allow. And that design changed in 2012 to this design here. And this is actually a fundamental difference, because you can see, and this is why I'm still bringing these ancient screenshots here to you, because they are so instructive. You can see different principles from web design here, for instance, the action line. the horizontal line just below the lowest clickable object on an interface, on a screen, is called the action line. And it is statistically well known that users would typically not pay attention to whatever is below the lowest clickable object. So if you hide the explanation, what happens when you click on this button below the action line, here all the information which data is being shared is hidden in this quasi-invisible area below the action line, while previously it was above. This makes it statistically much less likely that people even notice what they are doing by clicking yes. A second very famous design choice here is the call to action principle. This is a call to action button. It is one button, not a choice of two options. Here you are in front of a fork. You really have to start thinking, I just wanted to play the game and now I have to think. Allow, disallow, allow, disallow. No, here this is just my flowy. You don't even start thinking, you just click, because unless you are in the game, you just click next, 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 whatever comes up, next, 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 next. And imagine there were two buttons. That would totally disrupt your flow of clicking next, because then you have to choose. So this is the call to action principle. If you don't want to share your information, you would have to quit this whole dialogue. And people know that this decreases the likelihood that people would even consider what they are deciding here by 90%. And there are also some other little design tweaks here. For instance, the use of bold black font versus gray tiny font. This is more obvious, or even like pop-up information that would only pop up when you rest with the mouse pointer on it. Here you have to click this little question mark, and then this information pops up, information that was previously given here. You see, there are so many tricks to trick users into making decisions that they might not even notice that they are taking a decision here. Still continues? Okay, I think we're done now. You get the message. And this is a science, This is not just, Facebook accidentally, no, this is a science. You can study that. And you can actually empirically verify that, as we will see in the second part of the lecture. And there is a lot of brain energy and also AI energy put at work in finding out what design tricks are actually best to motivate you go a certain direction, not another direction that is not so desirable from the point of view of the company. Here, this is another design trick. This is actually not only a Pinterest screenshot, but the Pinterest screenshot is part of a screenshot from the Facebook UX guidelines, so from the Meta company UX guidelines, which say provide a glimpse of the content they will get first, and then let the login screen pop up. This is a typical thing. For you are not signed into a certain service, which is bad for the service because they want to know who you are. If you are signed in, they can connect your activity to your account, maybe to your phone number, to your email address. They can collect the data. If you are not signed in, they can not so easily connect the data to the existing data. So they want you to sign in because that is what amplifies the data that you will deliver to the company. But typically users don't like signing in because they already notice that they are disclosing something of themselves, and also it takes some time to remember your password. So you have two things that you can see here at the same time. The one is the trend towards single sign-on solutions, that would save people the step of entering a password. This is actually, I don't know if you even are still using this here. Maybe you always use this. I don't know. Using this has the function that first the central provider, Facebook or Google in this case, sometimes also Apple, can aggregate centrally all your activity across different other platforms, because they will also notice that you signed into Pinterest. And also Pinterest can connect the data through Google's API or Facebook's API to more profile data about you that you left on Google or Facebook or Meta or Instagram or WhatsApp, so that they can, for instance, show you more fitting advertisement or use your data much better for insurance risk scoring. So they even have an interest that you use this here instead of that. And the other thing that you see on such sites, and you cannot see it here, is that typically you would first really see the Pinterest website, and then you can scroll a little bit down, and after like 1.5 pages, plup, comes the gray, the background grays out, and then the sign-in screen pops up, and you cannot proceed further. So you get hooked a little bit, like by getting a glimpse on the content, and then once you start kind of liking it, you have to sign in, and then people know this is much more likely that you will then sign in instead of when you are being asked to sign in from the start. A conceptual idea that's in the background of such design trends or decisions is the much more general trend or theorem of nudging. I'm not sure who knows that, but it's hugely important. It tells a lot about the 21st century in Western societies. It's actually a concept from behavioral economics, so from Wirtschaftswissenschaften, or from the subdiscipline of economics that studies the economic relevance of behavior and influencing behavior, human behavior, and so on. And it's from Thaler and Sunstein. They published in 2007 this famous book, Nudge. Nudge means what it says here, or what it shows here on the cover, a little push, yeah, pushing you a little bit, but only a little bit. It's not forcing you to something. It's only just a gentle, like, giving you the tendency to move in a certain direction instead of another direction. Just a tendency, because you can always kind of choose that I don't want to go in that direction, but we want to make it more likely that you get in that direction. This is actually a whole full-fledged theory. Nudging has since been adopted in many areas of science, but also of policy, for instance in public policy, like how administrations would deal with their citizens, in business to customer communication. It's hard to find any commercial website nowadays that is not heavily loaded with nudging, and I have already showed you some examples. Corporate culture and human resource management, I will show you some examples later. Political theory and behavioral science. Nudging is really maybe the paradigm of the first 3 decades of our century. Here, let's go for the definition. Nudging is the method of influencing individuals' behavior and decisions without resorting to prohibitions, enforcement, legislation, education, economic incentives. Yeah, so the idea is we want to influence people's behavior, but we don't want to be restrictive or prohibitive, or we don't even want to take the time of educating you. We also don't want to argue with you. Yeah, this is decidedly a paradigm that does not want to influence your behavior by explaining to you why you should better behave another way or choose that option and not this option. No, this is kind of, and at the same time it wants to be gentle. Yeah, it doesn't want to force anybody. This is kind of the balance that this paradigm tries to do. Nudging often leverages insights from behavioral psychology and cognitive science. Here we are. Why cognitive science? Yeah, because, for instance, insights on how do people react to visual cues, or how do certain visual cues get processed in the brain subconsciously. Yeah, we are here heavily exploiting the level of immediate reactions, stimulus-response circuits that are prior to reflection and conscious deliberation. Yeah, this is actually a paradigm of influencing people's behavior on a pre-deliberative way and in a pre-deliberative fashion. As I told you, you don't want to argue with the people, you want to influence them, but in a way that they cannot claim that they were forced. Nudging in behavioral economics. This is a quote from Thaler and Sunstein themselves. a nudge is any aspect of the choice architecture that alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding any options or significantly changing their economic incentives. Yeah, I mean, most of what we have in the quote I explained to you already, but the one new thing here is the term choice architecture, which is the central or one central term in the nudging theory. It's all about designing the environment in which certain choices are being made. And in this theory, which is not an online theory, it's not a digital web design or whatever theory, it's a general theory, they typically use very classic textbook examples, such as where are the sweets placed on the supermarket checkout? For instance, when you place the healthy food at eye level in the canteen and the junk food somewhere in the background here, in the background, then it is statistically much more likely that people would grab the healthy food instead of the junk food compared to when you do it the other way around. This is why you usually find the sweets on little 4-year-old kids' eye level at the supermarket checkout, while it was prohibited to put the alcohol on the cigarettes too low in order to keep them away, at least from kids. Yeah, these are typical textbook examples of nudging. Putting the fruit at eye level, yeah, I got that. Opt out instead of opt in is also a huge genre of textbook examples for nudging. Yeah, for instance, in organ donation, there are countries such as Germany where opt out is the default. Yeah, if you don't do anything, you are opted out. There are other countries where opt in is the default, and guess what? The ratio of organ donators in this society is considerably higher. The same goes, for instance, in the US, famously for retirement plans by employers. Employers do not, you don't automatically have a pension or rente in the US. Yeah, you have to have an employer that has a retirement savings plan for you, and then there was the question, yeah, should this be opt-in or opt-out? And usually it's opt-in, because then the default is that people don't do it, and then the employer and also the employees save a lot of money now and will not have their pension later, while some companies switch that to opt-in to opt-out, so that people are opted in by default, and that makes the ratio of people with retirement savings much higher. Trivial examples, I know, but these are the examples that are usually used when you read about nudging. Are here also important, the third bullet point, and I need to mention it because it's so important. Social nudges. Yeah? Nudges can also be social. There was even research in behavioral economics about, for instance, sending letters in the US, sending letters to people that it is now time to file their tax returns, like Steuererklärung, tax reports. And in these letters it said that 80% of their neighbors already did. This is a social nudge, because it is known from behavioral psychology that people don't want to deviate from the norm, from the social norm. And if you tell people that the majority of the neighbors already filed their tax reports, that is apparently a cognitive shortcut or trigger for them to do so too. So you can increase the likelihood that people would file their tax reports on time. Yeah, this is a very important category of nudges where you use kind of exploit social mechanisms. But there are also more trivial examples here. For instance, this one, you want to nudge people to take the stairs instead of the Rolltreppe. By going in a playful way, here, for instance, labeling the stairs in a funny way, or making them look like a keyboard, and even produced sounds here when people move up. These are playful nudges in public space where, like, for instance, as health programs or activity promoting programs in public space. What you see here is that nudging always operates with the spatial arrangement of choices, yeah, from the supermarket checkout and the sweets and healthy food up to the stairs with the keyboard painting. It is always about spatial arrangements, even opt-in versus opt-out. Yeah? Is there a default cross in one of the two boxes, yes or no? This is also a spatial arrangement. And you could also see it on the screenshot I showed you before. How you arrange it visually has an impact on what is being chosen on average. And this is why the concept of choice architecture is so central to nudging. And it is the second important point about nudging, and I said it already many times now, but now we have it in written form. It is a statistical thinking. Yeah, we do not care for the single individual, and we are not arguing in a deterministic fashion on the level of the individual. Yeah, there is no deterministic mechanism that by presenting you opt-in versus opt-out, that then you will deterministically make a certain decision. Yeah, it's only on average. You are interested in managing large streams of people, and you don't care about the individual, or you don't claim a specific deterministic mechanism on the individual level. It is actually also a strategy that shows a certain frustration with educative ways of addressing people. It really comes from this stance, yeah, you never change people. It's so hard or even impossible to really change people, to change beliefs or opinions. No, what we do is we change environments instead of people. This is why we don't even want to explain anything to you or argue with you or educate you. We just arrange the environment so that you, with your mindset, this is actually a form of cynicism, yeah, that's evident in nudging, because it really does not believe in any enlightenment values about human rationality or human autonomy and decision making and deliberation and so on. That is all not on the table here in nudging. Last thing about nudging that's important, and it gets maybe even weirder now. Nudging itself in behavioral economics, so it comes from, is even touted as an element or a tool in a toolbox within a certain political doctrine that is called libertarian paternalism. So nudging is called a form or a manifestation of libertarian paternalism by its proponents, yeah, not by its critiques, but by its proponents. The idea of libertarian paternalism is that it is both possible and desirable for private and public institutions to affect behavior while also respecting freedom of choice. Oh, this sounds so much like a happy world. Yeah, everybody has their freedom of choice. This is why it is libertarian. Yeah, you leave people the liberty of choosing either way. Yeah, you do not restrict choices. You are not forcing people. This is the libertarian part of it, but still it is a form of paternalism. Why is it a form of paternalism? Paternalism attempts to influence the choices of affected parties in a way that will make choosers better off. That is the maybe central credo of this doctrine, written here by Thaler and Sunstein themselves. So as they envision it, nudging is there to make choosers better off. It is a way of exploiting subconscious mechanism of steering decisions in certain directions that are better for the choosers. Yeah? This is how they also kind of sell it in their books. For instance, when you put the healthy food at eye level, yeah, they do not bring examples where you put the more expensive stuff at eye levels and the white label products that cost only half of the money further down. No, these are not the examples they bring. They bring the examples where you use these techniques to make choosers obviously and uncontroversially better off. The question is why would it be tied to this making people better off? Yeah, it can obviously at the same time be abused or misused by the same logic. Yeah, you can also put the more revenue generating product at eye level. You can pre-tick the boxes that rather improve your business model instead of people's privacy. You see the point, yeah? But the way this has been entering not only scientific discourses but vast areas of institutional discourses in the Western world. For instance, the United Kingdom, they established a so-called nudge unit as part of the government in the 2000s. This was so central to their policy on the island that they established a whole government unit only doing nudging and kind of revolutionizing the public policies in all areas of the British government and turning it into nudging. This nudge unit then was I think, outsourced to some kind of a company that does now consulting work across the world, consulting governments of all countries in how to transform their governments to a nudge-style governance. And this is how we see that nudging marks actually the political use of findings from behavioral science, including fields in behavioral psychology and cognitive science. Apparently this is political. And as I already alluded, what might be problematic and what might be actually ideological about this whole thing, apparently the optimization function, so the goal towards which you optimize choices, is completely exchangeable. Yeah, it can also be very mean goals or goals that are very egoistic or profit-driven. So this is why the criticism is that the utility function in nudging is actually exchangeable, pluggable. Yeah, why would nudge thinking, the idea of nudging, the idea of exploiting cognitive shortcuts to manipulate decision making, why would that be actually inherently be tied to making people better off? It can also be tied to making people worse off, or then increasing your revenue or collecting more data. So in calling it an ideology, I mean exactly this point, yeah, that it was spread by emphasizing the promise that it will make choosers better off. Yeah, this is what made it spread. But how it is being used in reality is actually something completely different. And it will not always be used, and it is not always being used to make choosers better off. By the way, by what actually judgment? By what kind of standards better off? Maybe there are also controversial issues. For instance, when it gets to data sharing, there are sometimes pro and contra arguments to data sharing. So what is actually better off for you, and who are we to decide what's better off for you? These are also problems. Yes?
Did when introducing the concept of nudging, the proponents of it also not only explained how to do it, but then gave ideas for the framework of how to do this, like, I guess, justly or for these causes of good? Or did they just, or is the arguments mainly just, here's the framework?
As far as I know, they gave utilitarian frameworks, like ethical frameworks, to argue that, but more from the level of, for instance, retirement plans. It's very irrational for people not opting in for a retirement plan, and they are evidently better off. And maybe even the public or the Commonwealth is better off if people have retirement plans. In my observation, but I did not read all of this literature, they would primarily go for examples that are very uncontroversial. I have rarely seen like complex debates where the ethical decision is not so easy, and where, for instance, it depends on the perspective. Like, is it better off for you or for the collective? Is it better off for you right now, or like having the whole lifespan, like with a view to your whole lifespan? This is not so easy, and apparently that also needs explanation. And they call it a paternalism. In this label paternalism, there's this aspect that we do not want to enter into that discourse with the choosers. Yeah, we don't want to explain them. Yeah, if you have a retirement plan, it costs you $100 a month now, but in the end, you have a retirement saving plan. If you don't do, then you will be poor when you are old, but you have more money now. You can also go for private retirement saving. This is what they don't want to do, because they have a certain frustration with it, because it turned out to be inefficient, and people don't do it. Being paternalistic means we make a decision that works for most people and use these tools to kind of spread that decision. And what you often find as a counter-argument when you question these strategies for a certain bias or paternalistic cynicism, they would say, yeah, but all choice architectures have a default. Like, there is no choice, there is no disinterested choice architecture. Just because we want to change choice architectures now to improve them towards making choosers better off doesn't mean that we are now introducing ethics. There was already implicit ethics before, but nobody ever questioned it. Believe it or not, I think, again, it totally depends on the decision, like on the examples. For instance, when we get to the online space, there was no choice architectures before. Yes, and this is what I want to do now. Like the proposal here in the lecture is that we see that nudging is actually the mindset that governs web design after the Web 2.0 revolution, so starting in the early 2000s. Interface nudges, when UX flows, user experience design flows, are conceived as a sequence of small choices and decisions. Yeah, here you click next, and then as the next screen you click next, then you click in that menu, then you click on that video. This is a UX flow, yeah, like what you see and then you click. And when you conceive this as a sequence of small choices and decisions, then you can use nudging, yeah, and then the design of the associated interface is viewed as a design of choice architectures, and then you end up with this idea of interface nudges, so nudges that operate in the interface world, in the world of human-computer interaction. For instance, here, when you drive with Uber, you are nudged to give a tip. You are, like, the screen pops up in the Uber app at a certain point, and it also kind of shows a certain default. I mean, it's good for the driver because it increases the amount of tips drivers get. Yeah, if this wouldn't pop up, drivers would get less tips. On the other hand, it increases the likelihood that you tip through the app instead of giving them coins, which makes Uber able to first track what you tip, and second, maybe even take part of it. I don't know. They claim that they don't. Maybe that was changed at some point. I don't know. This is an interface nudge I already showed you, but now only with Instagram. Yeah, that it suggests to you that you should sign in to use the full features of the website. This here is also a nudge. I didn't need to get far to get a cookie banner screenshot. This is even a nice one here because nice in question marks, because it really nudges you with the color choice. Yeah, choosing colors. Or like using colors for buttons is also a dominant way of nudging, because you are more likely to click on the green button, especially if you don't pay attention to what's popping up. You would hardly click the red button without reading it. Apparently for your privacy, the red button is the best, but who cares for privacy anyway? Here, cookie banners are a big nudge anyway. This is one of my favorite cookie banner nudges. It's actually on a website that gathers menstruation data, and so it was female company. So they sell products like menstruation products and so on, and they have this. They use this rhetorics of revolutionizing. So we want to revolutionize the period. Cookies help us to understand your needs. If you are using our services, then we kind of assume that you agree to the use of cookies. I mean, this is not really a choice anymore, isn't it? Morally, it isn't, because if you want to help improving the period, you should click yes. And also, if you use the services, they already assume that you want. So this is a heavy nudge, even on the kind of deep content level, like lifestyle, spirit level. Nudges can be very diverse. This is what I just want to point out about you. Yeah, and all this emerged in the early 2000s. I mean, probably most of you never saw another internet, an internet without nudging. If you are born in this century and so on, I'm not sure how old you are, but I think most of you will be born in this century. Who is born in this century? Okay, all of you are born in this century. Good. So you never saw the web without nudging, I guess. So listen to me, old Opa, tell you it doesn't need to be that way. And then there was, even maybe roughly 10 years later in the 2010s, early in the 2010s, there was this counter movement. Because some people got fed up with it in Silicon Valley itself. And for instance, this guy here, Tristan Harris, a former Google employee. He quit Google and kind of went out and called out Google for Google and other tech companies for deliberately designing digital services for addiction. Yeah, for these kind of tricky, using design tricks to make people take bad choices or get addicted to the apps, stay more and more time on the app, which is also part of this game. Yeah, and then he founded the Center for Humane Technology and started this big movement that has been labeled time well spent or digital detox or digital well-being. And then you could see that, this was getting big to some extent, like The Guardian and others would take it up. And then companies, platform companies were quick to react. And how do platform companies react to criticism? Of course, they embrace it. And you can since then see on all major, for instance, smartphone operating systems, these attempts to push your digital well-being. For instance, these things here emerged, like that you get reflected how much time you spend on the different apps. Here, The Guardian, this is a Guardian article from 2018 where it was introduced on Android. Google touts digital well-being tools to help users disengage from the phones. This is here also part of that, yeah, that you can configure your phone to show you some, like, is it time to take a break after 2 hours of Instagram? Interruption screens. This was also introduced as kind of the reaction to this criticism. I think most of you know that or have that on their phones. Maybe you turn it off, maybe you don't, I don't know. Here you can, some phones, they turn their screen color to more yellow leaning color scheme, or even to gray after a certain time of day, to suggest to you that it's now maybe time to get to sleep, and to already kind of make your eyes adapt to the darkness. The YouTube app would tell you to take a break after binge watching a certain number of videos, and that was all kind of the reaction to the criticism. The thing is, these are nudgings as well, right? This is this stays completely within the paradigm of nudging. Such a thing, here let's look at this again. This is a nudge, because it does not prevent you from using Instagram further. It does not even change the business model of Instagram or question their predatory design practices. It just adds a layer that suggests to the users that they are in control, like that gives them some feeling of, I'm in control. This stays fully within the paradigm of nudging. The same here. How much time users use a specific app on a platform is a very valuable information for platform operators, right? And so digital well-being is actually the best excuse to track your usage on your phone without even having to hide it, without even having to hide that they are tracking your usage patterns. Yeah, that was done before, but companies had to hide. Yeah, because these platform companies always want to know what are the biggest apps, what are the most important apps. For instance, they might even acquire apps and like companies behind the apps and so on by that data. And this digital well-being initiative presented just the best opportunity to make that at daylight, to do that tracking activity at daylight, because when you can mirror it to the user at the interface, you also have that data on the server. So we can see a typical way of reacting to criticism that is kind of embracing and appropriating the criticism in a way that kind of makes it dry out. And instead of real empowerment, digital well-being still follows the solutionist approach. Yeah, problems, in this case, problems that are created by technology can allegedly be solved by technology. Yeah, so, there is criticism, okay, there will be an app for that. In this case, like these pop-up screens or the color of the screen turning. Yeah, there is allegedly a technological solution to a problem. That is the idea of solutionism, this tech mindset. Okay, if there is a social problem, a problem in the habits, in the mindsets, in the psychology of people, there will be an app to fix that problem. This is solutionism, and in this case, solutionism even goes against the problems, or is employed to allegedly or putatively tackle the problems that are even created by technology. Let's get to part 2. It's a little bit shorter. What does this have to do with AI? And the link to AI gets through big data. So we need to question, what does this have to do with big data? We need again to take a certain kind of detour in an age where you were not yet born, and look at the 90s. How did you do UX design, user experience design in the 90s? In the 90s, you would do usability testing. So if you develop a certain software or app, and you want to know, does it work for the customers or for the users, you would invite users to your facilities, like 10 maybe. You would invite them, and then you give them a device with your app, and then you say, please write an email in my app, or whatever it is, and you would film them. You can see that here. You would film them and show and look at it in slow motion afterwards, and analyze where did they move their finger, did they find the button immediately, or did it take them time to figure out where in the menu this function is. And so you would analyze that, and you do that maybe with 10 people, and then you have some feedback, and then you can improve your your user interaction design. That is the classical way of doing it. And then came the Web 2.0 and all the software layers that came with it, and also stuff like this. Google Analytics was a service founded in the early 2000s, I think in maybe 2006. It was a web analytics service. I don't know if you know what a web analytics service is. It is, in this case, a service by Google that allows website operators to track users' movements through a website or through an app. It can also be used for smartphone apps. It's maybe called differently, but the principle is the same. For websites, using Google Analytics only requires website developers to include such a small JavaScript snippet in the header of the HTML page. And you see that this then would contact Google servers to load some libraries, and it would activate JavaScript that can do a lot of magic on your page that you as a user would never notice. For instance, track all your clicks. Yeah, just record using JavaScript where you click at what time, and send each single click to the Google server. Or where on which subpage you are, or how far you scroll down, or whether you open a certain kind of accordion extension, fill a form, submit a form, all this. Yeah. So everything. The thing is, the recording, the tracking is done by the client, by the browser. So it's done on the node, and only the click data is being transmitted to the Google server. And this can be embedded in arbitrary third-party websites. So you start a web page, and you can use Google Analytics for free by just including these scripts in your website. This is usually something that is embedded, for instance, in WordPress and other frameworks by default. So you don't even have to copy-paste JavaScript snippets. And for website operators and developers, Google Analytics offers then an interface, an analytics interface, where website operators can see these tracking data. So they can see or get like analytics about how many people visit their site, where do people move. They would even kind of do that by demographics or by subpages. Yeah, you can see it here, I think, a little bit. You can analyze that by different kind of categories. What you can also do is visualize these flow charts through a website. Yeah, people land at the landing page, and then where do they go? The largest portion goes to this subpage, and some others go to these subpages, and then from there they go here, and blah, 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 and then there is maybe the checkout if it's a web shop. Maybe these are product pages, and some people put something in the checkout, and so on. So and people are interested, like, how do people flow? We again see this very aggregate perspective here. Yeah, we don't care about individuals, but we are more interested in flows of masses of individuals through our website, and this is being done to detect friction, right? Maybe you want to know why so few people really proceed through the checkout for their new sneakers compared to the number of people who looked at sneakers for the first place. So you lose people. Typically, you lose people at each stage in the flow through such a web page. You can also visualize that by more aggregate goals. For instance, here this is like the path from the entrance page to putting something in the shopping cart, and then billing and shipping, and then payment, and then really a purchase is complete. And at each step you have a dropout. Yeah, many people would put something in the cart but not really buy it. That is, you see a high fraction here, and then once people start into the further sections of checkout, dropout rate is typically small. But imagine there was a big dropout rate here. Then you would say, something must be wrong with billing and shipping. Maybe shipping costs are too high. Or maybe the payment does not work for certain payment methods, or whatever. So this is how people kind of analyze where are frictions on their websites. You would in marketing, you call that a conversion funnel, such a chain of steps in a usage flow where at each step people can drop out. You call that a conversion funnel. Conversion means the ratio of people who get out in the end divided by the number of people who started in the beginning. That is the conversion rate. Yeah, the conversion rate is a number between 0 and 1. And a high conversion rate is what you want. Ideally, you want everybody who lands on your page to also buy something on your page. But typically, you have dropouts at every stage, and therefore it's a funnel. It gets smaller and smaller. This is what you can do with Google Analytics as one example. Another example would be something like this here. This is also an ancient technique, sometimes still used in some cognitive science research, heat maps. For instance, you want to know where do people look on a website to analyze how does my web design work in terms of guiding focus and attention. And there are applications, Google Analytics can also track your mouse movement without the clicks but only the movement. And there are attempts to predict such a heat map data that you would receive from eye tracking. Yeah, typically you would go for eye tracking with real users, but you can simulate that or approximate that by using mouse or analyzing mouse movement on the website, and then you can emulate heat maps, attention heat maps at large scale. But I wanted to answer the question, what do these design tricks have to do with big data? And to understand that, we need to look at yet another feature of web analytics tools, which is called A/B testing. A/B testing is, again, a very important thing in the 21st century. I think, again, one of the maybe magic tools that determine our culture, corporate culture, public culture to a large extent. What is A/B testing? So imagine that you tweak your interaction design to make people more likely to buy the sneakers. And for instance, you experiment with red buy button or blue buy button, or larger prices or lower prices, like in terms of the font size, or certain other design tweaks. And you just want to know what works better in terms of conversion rate performance. As I told you an hour ago, this is a science nowadays. Like these design tricks, optimizing a design in terms of statistically making it more likely that people go that way and not that way. This is a science, and it is actually an empirical science. And this here is how you do it. You would, if you are a big website that has thousands of visitors every hour or every day, you would just create different design versions, for instance, with the blue button and with the red button. And then you would put them both on the web server, and you would randomly decide which of the visitors will see version A or version B. And then you would do the analytics by these two cohorts. So you would do the web analytics, for instance, calculate the conversion funnel for group A and for group B. And as they were randomly assigned, you can compare which of the version performs better. This is also something that you can do with web analytics services such as Google Analytics. This is where actually I think 4 different variations were compared against a baseline version of the website, and then you can see how they perform. This is how you would empirically test for an optimized design. And you can do that with everything. Yeah? You can not only test for button color, but maybe which design makes people stay longer and scroll down on my feed, which design would, for instance, make people buy more stuff of a certain political leaning, for instance, in a merchandise shop. What do we have to do to attract, for instance, more voters of a certain political direction as opposed to voters of another political direction? Yeah, you can do A/B testing with kind of everything that amounts or that relates to how people respond to what they see on the website. And this is how you can also even connect that to AI. Yeah? You would collect data and in real time test your design. It doesn't need the human designers anymore. If you're a big company, you can even come up with AI, generative AI, to improve the web design and to test it in real time and get feedback and then learn from the feedback that this tweak was an improvement or not an improvement, and so on. Yeah, you see how we are really in a feedback loop where you can put design, like web design, visual design, on not only a scientific basis or empirical basis, but really maybe do it with AI or like do it in an automated fashion. Yeah, the web is nowadays a real-time behavioral laboratory. In May 2025, which is now 57% of the 10 million most visited websites on the web use a web analytics service. Fun fact, when I held this lecture for the first time 4 years ago, this number was 65. So it's going a little bit down in recent time, which I find interesting. I think this is because of the alt-right backlash we are currently witnessing, where big tech companies are heavily implicated. 47% use Google Analytics. So Google Analytics is by far the market leader. The next biggest player is Metapixel. Yeah, the tracking pixel from Meta is also an analytics service by Meta. And then WordPress Jetpack by 4%. So Google Analytics is the core sign monopolist, or at least the major player in this market. And you see how offering the analytics services, which Google offers for free to web developers, is actually a way for Google to extend their tracking infrastructure to millions of third-party websites. So they do not only track you on their own sites, yeah, when you click search results, for instance, but they reach out to you even when you are on a completely different site, if it has Google Analytics embedded, which it is, which 47% of them have. And all this shows that there is now an inherent link between UX design and data aggregation, and potentially also AI. UX design is now a data-driven scientific discipline. I told you that already. This is only the summary of what I told you already. Let's get to the third part. I think if we zoom out from all of this a little bit, you can witness certain trends in the way web design or maybe interaction design that is used in big data companies and AI companies shapes subjectivity. And this is now, I try to bring it back to the point of subjectivity now. Yeah, the question is how do these design practices impact how we feel, think, perceive, our expectations, and so on. And I think you can observe certain aspects about this. And I subsumed this here on the trend of sealed surfaces. I come back to that. The one aspect or register in which this happens is the level of thinking. How do we shape the thinking of people? This here is a nozzle of a vacuum cleaner. I have another one, but remember how this looks like? This is another nozzle of a vacuum cleaner. Do you notice the difference? It's in this here, yeah, in the switch. The nozzle has a switch. For those of you who don't use nozzles, you can switch between how do you say that? Hairs coming out of it or being removed. So the question is, do you pay, for instance, do you want to vacuum clean carpet or a plain floor, such as tiles? And with this switch, you can switch between the two modes. But the difference here is in how the switch is kind of described by means of these symbols. Yeah, there's even a third design that looks like this. You notice the difference? Like this one here was the first. This one here was the first, and this is actually the oldest design. I came up with this idea of using these photos because I noticed the transition from the old design, which is this here, to the new design in my life, like at a certain point, maybe 20 years ago. And this design here, I mean, it describes how the nozzle looks like. Yeah, does it have these hairs, or is it plain? While this one here is indifferent to how the tool looks like, but describes a difference in the object on which you use the tool. Yeah, a difference in the floor. Although by that switch you do not switch from carpet to tiles in your apartment, but you only modify how the tool looks like. And here, in this design, they did even not even paint the tool anymore, they only paint the floor. And I would say that is a huge difference, because in this design here, it tells you a feature, a property of the tool, and then it is up to you to know or to know better whether I need the hairy or the plain nozzle for this specific purpose at hand here. Sometimes I vacuum clean my carpets with the hairy one because it better removes some of the dirt. In this case here, it takes from the user this necessity to make this decision, or to even care about the mechanical property of the tool. Yeah, we do not disclose to the user here what it means mechanically, that it differs in terms of how the nozzle looks like, but we only indicate on what does the user want to use the tool, and the rest, the configuration, the appropriate configuration of the tool is then left to the machine. This is again paternalism, isn't it? Because you are not in the loop anymore to decide what mechanical properties of the tool are most appropriate for your purpose. And here we are not even kind of communicating anymore that there is a tool. It's only like clean the carpet or clean the tiles. It's a pity that you still need to move the nozzle yourself, and that it doesn't move automatically. Here you can go for similar examples. We can take a tour to MediaMarkt. The same goes for microwave. This is actually more of a European versus US, North American divide, what we see here. So this design here is the microwave design where you can push a button where you say, I wanna heat curry or pasta or fish, And I mean, if your specific food is not on the list, I'm not sure what you do. Maybe you approximate. Yeah, my Kartoffelauflauf is like potato products, maybe, or my beef is like chicken. I don't know how you do it, but in this case here, you select just the time and the strength, yeah, the power. The thing is that these buttons here are nothing else but a front end to this. Yeah, this microwave does nothing else but control for the time and the power. It uses the heating or the microwaves. So this is kind of the similar thing. Here you can use it as a tool. You understand the mechanics, and then you can try to think, okay, for this particular food, what mechanics do I need? And then you configure it. And you are in control of the purpose, means relation, yeah, what you want to do and what is the best way of achieving it. While here, you are completely kind of out of the loop of reasoning about the means end relationship, and you can only believe that the microwave is pre-configured in a good way. This is actually paradigmatic for design trends of the 2000s. Don't Make Me Think is the title of a famous book on web design of the early 2000s by Steve Krug. And by this he means exactly that, yeah? Don't make me think. Please don't design a button in a way that I need to think. I just want to be picked up without having to kind of start my brain. And I just want to push potatoes, and then it does what I want, because it knows what I want. Instead of, potatoes maybe 1 minute at half power. Yeah, you see what I mean. And this is also the paradigm here in web design. He explains it, for instance, with in the way you would name certain buttons and so on. I think this is a big trend, a trend that kind of demobilizes users' even willingness to understand what's going on. Yeah, if you are confronted through your whole life with artifacts that would not communicate or not negotiate means-end relationships with you, but only like kind of read your lips what you want, you are subjectivated in a different way. Yeah, this shapes your expectations towards technology, and maybe it also shapes you into a subjectivity that is more helpless or more ignorant towards how artifacts really work, what artifacts actually do. And that would then deprive you of the way of the means of using artifacts in an unexpected way or in a creative way. Maybe it also creates new creativity. This is not to be denied, but I just want to kind of highlight this trend where these artifacts are kind of created in a way that we should not consider them tools. Yeah, a tool is something where where you have an end point, yeah, something that you want to achieve, and then you make the decision what tool is best suited to reach that point. We had that in the beginning, yeah, about instrumental relationship to technology, right? And technological artifacts, as they are being created in their interaction patterns with us, they try to demobilize or make unlikely this instrumental relationship. They want you to perceive them not as tools, but as things that read your lips and then do it for you, but be paternalistic to you, and so on. Another register of examples, for instance, is here. I really love that, error messages. In the 90s, error messages looked like this on computers, and they are really very unusable unless you have the manual next to the computer where you can then look up the error code and then you see, this was what went wrong. But nowadays they wouldn't give you error codes they would not give you error codes anymore. Like you have no way of figuring out what went wrong in this new or more recent design of error messages. They would only tell you something went wrong, and not even the tech-savvy user has a chance of such a design here might, to the user who isn't interested, it kind of communicates the same, right? Something went wrong, although this looks much more alarming than this. It still communicates the same information to the disinterested user. But to the interested user, this here is really useless, while this gives at least some lead what might have been the problem and how it could maybe be solved, apart from Microsoft Word itself Googling on the web for a solution. So the language you use in talking about devices is also a product of corporate cultures and design cultures, and the company Apple is maybe the forerunner in this discipline. Here at some point, when was it? Oh, maybe 10 years ago, I don't remember. It was leaked that when you work in an Apple store, you are called a genius, right? These are the genius is the kind of the title of the people working in Apple stores. And if you want to be a genius, you have to undergo a genius training. Like it's kind of a boot camp, it takes a couple of weeks, where you get trained in being a genius. And being a genius means that you have to kind of be able to play a certain interaction script between you and the customers in the store. Yeah. Now it's about interaction between you, a human, and a human customer, and not between the computer and the customer. And this training, they have this kind of guidebook here, or Genius Training Handbook, and that was leaked 10 years ago. And in this guidebook, you can find really funny things. For instance, the language that they are to avoid. For instance, if you go to Apple Store and say that your iPhone hangs, or got bombed or crashed, they will highly likely not repeat this terminology to you, because this is what they are prohibited to use when talking about Apple devices. They are to use these kind of terminologies. Yeah, it unexpectedly quit, it does not respond, it stops responding instead of these words. Or maybe avoid, this is the kind of the middle step, is that it freezed. And so it continues. For instance, if you complain, my mouse is not supported by your Apple computer, then the genius would repeat to you, it's not compatible. It does not work with. And in analyzing this, you find that they shape the language in such a way that it is always, the device is always in an active position. It does not respond anymore. It decided not to respond to you anymore. Instead of it crashed. It is not compatible with, is not as harsh as, or it does not work. The device does not work with your mouse. Is again putting the device in the active position. And so they want to really shape this a certain perception of the devices, even in the terminology you use when talking about it. Here, from the Apple website. Sorry, it's in German. Here, but I put the translation here on the right side. So this is the translation for the people who don't speak German. So if the Apple system, it is a Linux kernel, and if it has a kernel panic and hangs, the kernel drops some output and then it stops. It's called kernel panic in the common Linux parlance. And for the last 50 years. But they apparently don't like this expression. So in rare cases, your Mac may detect an unrecoverable problem, not error, problem, that affects all open apps, processes, kernel processes, but okay, let's call them open apps. If this happens, your Mac will require a restart, again, active wording, it's not you have to restart your app, but the app requires a restart. This may be due to an error known as kernel panic. It's not an error known as kernel, it is a kernel panic. This occurs when a fundamental part of the operating system, the kernel, detects a problem. Basically it hangs, it cannot process anymore. Detects a problem that requires a restart. You see how they carefully engineer the language they want to be used in talking about their devices, because that anthropomorphizes the devices, and that kind of pushes people away from really understanding what's going on under the hood, of the devices. It comes up with a blooming, maybe even childish language that you would rather use when talking about a rare animal or creature instead of a technical device where in theory every human being is capable of understanding what went wrong. Yeah, and where in theory any human being could come up with the idea, maybe I can master this problem, maybe I can open the device, reset the device, install something, figure out how to configure it in such a way that it works. Yeah, this is demobilized, the idea that the user interferes with the device as something they can control. And this is what I call the strategy of sealed surfaces, like starting from the vacuum nozzles until here, like it has these different registers, a discourse, but also like how you think about people, about devices. And the strategy of sealed surfaces is the dominant tendency in digital media culture that assumes that users are not able to and do not want to use the device as a tool, yeah, remember the vacuum nozzles, and be in control of the devices. Remember the Apple Genius handbook. And this is a strategy of subject production, right? It is a strategy of producing subjectivity. It creates and shapes how people relate to technical devices. And such things as, oh, I don't understand anything about technology, I need to go to the Apple Genius to explain me, is actually a product of this subjectivation strategy that demobilizes the idea that maybe I can do it myself. Sealed surfaces refers to an ensemble of commercial design practices that systematically demobilize common knowledge of digital artifacts, control and self-determined utilization, perceiving the device as a tool, repairing it on your own, configuring it on your own, deciding what you need on your own, all this, yeah? The thing is that there is now a hegemony, like it's the dominant perception that this is too complicated for me, I need to be paternalized, and what I'm claiming here is that this is actually a product of how these tools are designed and something from which companies benefit. Yeah, it is a design on purpose, it has a certain purpose, and this is the power strategy. The strategy hinders collective responsibility taking and co-produces self-perceived helplessness of users. And this is then the ideology of helpless users. Yeah, I call it an ideology because I think actually by default users are not helpless and users are not stupid and users are not in the position to help themselves, but they are rendered to believe this of themselves and of each other through such discursive strategies or design strategies and all this together. So digital nudging and sealed surfaces are two components of the power apparatus or dispositif of contemporary digital media culture, in my view. And this media culture creates subjectivities and this aspect of sealed surfaces, yeah, that we cannot look below the surfaces of devices. They don't even have a screw anymore, yeah? There is no like battery lid that I can like open. It's all sealed on the software layer as much as on the hardware layer. This creates this kind of mental perception that that modifies how we think and perceive devices, and the nudging aspects that I tried to outline to you in the first two parts is more the kind of behavioral governance layer. Yeah? It governs how you would interact with the devices, how you would behave in the choice architectures and so on. In this lecture today, I tried to outline these power strategies to you, and the thing is, there is so many people asking, okay, what can I do? I should avoid using Google, okay, I should avoid using this and using that. The thing is, this is maybe not the counter strategy to this power. Think about this. How can we counter this power? Can we do it by avoiding using these services? Is this enough? Or is this only responsibilization? Maybe you can read through this slide for the next week because I have not the time to really explain it now. But we will pick it up here. So what I want to say is that we have a collective issue here. The resistance against this is not that we individually are responsible, but we are responsible collectively. Reading recommendation for this week, as I told you, this chapter. Thank you very much, and see you next week.